Good evening, everybody. It is 6:33 p.m. and we're going to call the March 24th meeting of the Drainage Board to order. Can I have a motion to adopt this evening's agenda? Charlie, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, seeing and hearing none. The adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting. That's from the January 20th meeting. We have a motion to accept those. Councillor O'Reilly, seconder, Mike Verbeek. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, we're going to move right into item 3, meeting to consider the Martin Municipal Drain, and 3.1, presentation of the report. Michael Garrett. Oh, you're on mute, Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I just, something happened where everything went really small. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Go ahead.
Can you see me?
We can. All good.
Okay, through your chairman and to the board, this engineer's report has been prepared under Section 4 of the Drainage Act as per the request received by the City of Kawartha Lakes. The scope of works includes preparing a drain report to address the petition for the drainage on the Martins land. The existing conditions include a drainage system in the air consisting of a surface course that direct flows from a pond in the southeast corner of Lot 19, Concession 12, that's the petitioning landowner's pond, to Pigeon Lake. The surface course is conveyed across Pigeon Lake Road via a Pigeon Lake Road allowance via 3 centerline culverts. In 1985, the road authority completed drainage modifications along Pigeon Lake Road and directed water that normally flowed in a southeast direction onto the Martins lands. There have been numerous meetings on this project, and prior to the project, prior to the Martins filing for a petition, there was an attempt for a mutual agreement drain. I had discussions with the landowners, the Dilling and Reed property, informed them of the rights under the Drainage Act and what the rights as a drainage mutual agreement, how the legality of a drainage mutual agreement, and that they can be basic or they can involve construction specifications, maintenance restrictions, etc. However, the mutual agreement did not proceed. Additional meetings were held with the downstream landowners at the time of the survey and on November 21st, once the draft report was complete. Plans were sent on August 8th for review as well. An on-site meeting was held on August 18th, 2021 at 1899 Pigeon Lake Road. Detailed minutes are included in the report. However, the main concern at that meeting was about water being diverted by the road contract, and that the engineer, myself, should consider pumping the water and utilizing the roadside ditch. However, it's important to remember that the water in this watershed flows to the low run, and there's always going to be water going to that low run. So you can pump a ditch, but there's still going to be water coming to the low run because that's where the water naturally goes. And so regardless of whatever happens, the Martins need an outlet for their lands, and they're going to get their outlet. We would give their outlet normally at the low end on the property. Approvals, Kawartha Conservation is aware of the project, completed a site visit, and has no objection to the proposed work. Approval from the Conservation Authority was obtained before submitting this report. Department of Fisheries and Oceans has no objections to this report, and approval has been obtained prior to submitting the report. The proposed open channel shall be designed to accommodate a 37.5 millimeter per 24-hour drainage coefficient. The channel design criteria includes an assumed minimum tile depth of 760 millimeters, plus the diameter of the tile with 300 millimeters of freeboard at the petitioning landowner's property line. The design ensures a sufficient outlet for the petitioning land regardless of the downstream obstructions. So that means if stuff falls into the water course, standard debris, there is trees downstream, it won't affect the sufficient outlet of the drain. The Martins have requested to direct 5.4 hectares of subsurface drainage that normally flows north, to Pigeon Lake, south to Pigeon Lake via the proposed drain and downstream surface course. The flows are limited to subsurface only and will increase the channel flows by 0.0078 cubic meters per second. The increase is considered minimal since the A&N Martins intend on tiling the parcel, tiling the land will typically result in improved drainage since the tiled land continually drains, creating storage in the soils. The change in water level in the downstream Pigeon Lake centerline culverts, Pigeon Lake Road centerline culverts, due to the increased tile water is estimated to be between 1 and 2 centimeters, and the city of Kawartha Lakes has approved the request to direct subsurface water of the proposed drain. So there's an estimated cost of $55,565, which includes engineering but does not include inspection. Detailed breakdown allowances have been included in the report. Detailed assessments are included in the report. Detailed maintenance schedules are included in the report. Construction specifications are included in the report, and plan and profile drawings are included in the report. Since the report's been issued, I have had one comment sent to me from the downstream landowners. On March 21st, 2022, the Dilling and Reeds contacted me to discuss the drain across their lands. I did provide them with budget numbers. They asked about possibly enclosing the drain or putting a culvert in. So I gave budget numbers. It's always hard to give budget numbers, particularly with pricing right now, but I did the best I could. And they asked about culvert assessments. So that was in the letter as well. Typically, culverts are between 30 and 50%. The majority of the culverts that I do on drains are 50%, 35% would be on the lower end and would be on a big culvert. I gave cost for a closed drain of somewhere between $65,000 and $85,000 plus engineering. Again, that would all depend on when I get the pipe size, but it gives you a kind of an order of magnitude how much it costs to enclose a drain there. And if the Dilling and Reed landowner signed on to the petition, I needed to make them aware that their benefit would change, since they would have a greater benefit. Currently, their assessment reflects the benefit they receive from their lands. KRCA has approved the current design, and during the site visit, they did no concerns. They had no concern the drain was, but they said there was more concerns in the wooded area in the ravine. It's kind of a rocky terrain with, I can't really say what they found there, but they didn't find anything, but they said there is habitat that they liked in the shaded areas with the rocks. KRCA has approved the current design as previously said. So to extend it past the fjord crossing, we'd have to go back in to submit for approvals. The Reeds and Dilling felt that the city should bear some responsibility for an enclosure cost if they proceeded with it, because the city directed more water to their lands. I believe this is a reasonable assumption, since because we did charge the city under this report for additional costs for the deepening and additional costs associated with directing that water to the drain. So it would be also, if there was an enclosure, there would be some merit to that. However, the enclosure is limited to 37.5 millimeters per 24 hours. So there is still going to be an even if you enclose, there's still got to be a grass swale above, because the whole drain will never take all the water under the big events. They talked about a culvert. The culvert's a bit different because the flows when you do tile drainage is based on an area and a drainage coefficient set by OMAFRA, which is 37.5 millimeters per 24 hours, and it doesn't correlate to a storm. However, when we do open channels, we design culverts to design storm events between the 2 and the 5 year, depending on where they're located. And because of the length and the watershed use, the city's increased flows under the 2-year event are not that significant, because there's wooded lands upstream and there's also like a longer watershed. So that all affects how it works, but there is an increase in flow, definitely. I have it here if you're interested. I guess I could say it really quickly. So under the 2-year flow, it'd be about a 13% increase, 0.13. Under the 5-year flow, which is probably what I would design that culvert for, it would be about a 30% increase. So there is an increase in flows. It's kind of on the borderline. When I looked at a preliminary culvert, it's right at the border of whether it would increase the size or not. So really, when we look at that, we'd say, well, they are putting more water there, so they should bear some responsibility for it. And that responsibility would be somewhere in the extra cost pipe, which would be estimated about $3,000 to $4,000. And then of course, half would be credited to the landowner that is utilizing the culvert, but the other half would be assessed upstream credited to landowners upstream. If the Dillings and Reed wanted to enclose this or put a culvert in, they would need to sign on to the petition and request this. The Dillings are allowed to install a private culvert on their own drain, obviously downstream. Our drain ends. After that, they can do what they want. Their forward crossing is downstream of the drain. If they put a culvert there, that would bear enough. That wouldn't have any problem with the drain itself. And the Dillings and Reed also asked me if they could change this report in the future. So yes, we change reports all the time. It goes through a section 78 report. That's where you can improve a drain. You can also extend it to a sufficient outlet. It's kind of gray whether you would extend this drain under a section 4 or a section 78. Typically, we extend drains under section 78, but we do have to go through the process. But the point of that is that if they ever wanted this drain extended down, or if they ever wanted a culvert on the drain, they can apply for it through the Drainage Act. And some additional questions I can address now. I got an email that had a couple. The Dilling and Reeds were mentioned that the report specifies all associated costs with direct runoff, the liability. Well, that's the report actually says the liability for the redirected water. So that increased water that we sent there. Obviously, there's water going there. So if the city puts more water there, they're responsible for the additional water, but not all the water from the watershed. They asked, who pays the person to decide if the improvement's necessary? So that happens like through the Drainage Act, we do numerous meetings. So the engineer is obviously responsible. I'm obligated to bring this drain to a sufficient outlet. And during that process, we have numerous meetings like I talked about where we present plans and where we talk to landowners. And when I issued this report, this is what had been discussed with all the landowners in the watershed, and also specifically with the two downstream landowners, because I know it's important. It's an important drain to them because it is affecting their property. And so they have a very large stake in it. So I did make the effort to get them the plans so they can see them ahead of time and they could ask me questions. We had questions when I was up on another drain meeting up there. I went to visit them as I was meeting with KRCA as well. And then they also asked about what other watersheds would be allowed to drain into this watershed. So right now the report has a watershed, and that's the limit of this drain. In the future, if anyone ever wanted to tie in or redirect water into it, they would have to go through a section 65 report, for a subsequent connection, as it's called. And when that happens, a report has to be prepared. There's meetings, public meetings, and a report has to be circulated. But in that case, the engineer again has to demonstrate that anything that they put in there won't negatively affect any of the existing infrastructure. Otherwise, the landowner would have to pay for it. Typically, it doesn't happen that often. I think in all the reports I've written, I would say I've taken maybe 10 or 15 subsequent connection reports. It does happen. It happens in cases like this. It also happens sometimes when there's changes in land use and people build things on their property. So now I can answer any questions from the board or from the public through the chairman, sorry.
Thanks very much for that report, Michael. Does the committee have any questions of Michael at this time? Councillor O'Reilly.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Michael. Just on your last comment there about the capacity and the responsibility, would you suggest, like sometimes, I mean, you could predict, but a lot of the farmers now have a lot of the fence rows taken out. So it seems like the water seems to come a lot faster and sooner than it does. So is there something built in for that, or is that a consideration in your plan?
Yeah, so that comes up a lot. It comes up more often because people want a bigger than what OMAFRA will give grant on, 37.5 millimeter coefficient, but it's the same principle. So when we use the OMAFRA coefficient, we use what they call like a point load. So it goes into the system. So the upper system, it all comes in at once, but of course it also brings every single section down all at once. So it's a very conservative way to design a drain. When you design sewers, you account for the lag time through the sewer when it goes from manhole A to manhole B, and that reduces the size of the resident or the urban sewer. But a drain doesn't work like that. A drain's meant through OMAFRA to get a lot of water in there. So no, we don't have too many comments about that. My response always to that is that we need to put in bigger catch basins to get the water into the system because the old catch basins are 2 foot by 2 foot, and they take water, but they don't take as much as if you go with a 1.2 meter by 1.2 meter square inlet. That takes a lot of water.
Any further questions from the committee of Michael at this time? Okay, Seeing none, we're going to go to questions, question and answer period. And Joel, you want to go through who's signed on for tonight?
We have Charlene Tanner.
Okay, what I don't understand is how can one family disrupt 8 different families? When it doesn't benefit us, it only benefits him.
Through your chair, would you like me to answer that?
Sure, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, so the Drainage Act is very specific about how to assess. So everyone in Ontario is responsible for the water generated on their land. So if you're in a watershed in the dam, the Martins asked for the water going through there, that's not the Martins water. So anyone that's in that water that has a responsibility in Ontario for the water generated on their land as it goes downstream. And what the Drainage Act does is it takes that liability away.
But he bought the land knowing this was a problem.
Yes, that's not uncommon. I mean, that's the right of people in Ontario under the Drainage Act. The Drainage Act says there's a benefit assessment for people that are benefiting, but there's an outlet assessment that says you're assessed based on the amount of water generated on your land as it moves downstream. So there's always outlet assessments on drains from people upstream that they can be 2 concessions over. But if their water goes there, they will be responsible. And some of those drains that are 15 kilometers long, you can do a culvert at the outlet and everyone's paying for it, right? If your water gets into that drain, you're paying for it. You're not only paying for that culvert, you're paying for any culvert, your portion of any culvert and any maintenance all the way up the entire drain. Because water is in.
But I didn't put the culverts in, the city did.
No, but you put your water from your land goes off and goes into the course. And in your case, like your assessment, so you're located west of Settlement Roads. The city of Kawartha Lakes is paying for your assessment. In this report, I've taken those lands where they redirected the water to the Martins lands, and they're paying those assessments because they have a responsibility for the water that they redirected onto the Martins land. So historically, your lands and Wilson's lands and Mr. Hong's lands and Salter and Mr. Pikely's, their lands would have went in a different direction, but somewhere along the line before I got here, there was work done where they directed them, and therefore they're responsible for those assessments. So when you look at the report, you'll see probably beside your name, I'm assuming, there's a star, and that star would indicate, if you go to the last page, it says there that the star indicates that the assessment to be paid by the road authority for redirecting water to the drain and also for the future maintenance. So you're in this drain on paper because I have to put you in the drain on paper. You're in the watershed. And I can't give you a 0 assessment because it doesn't work, but I can write that you don't have to pay your assessment because the city has to pick it up for redirecting. It's hard to take, like if I put you in as a 0 acres, it just adds a lot of confusion on the watershed map because it'd be like, why are they have a 0 acre if they're in the watershed? Then you should have taken them out. So we don't do that. We leave them in the watershed, but we can take their assessment and say that other people have to pay it like the city because of what they did. And that's only because the city redirected the water back then.
Okay.
Okay,
So
are you good,
I'll
Charlene?
mute and then I'm good, yes. I'll mute and somebody else can ask question.
The next online is Cindy and Scott Haney.
Hi, so just to build on what Charlene was saying, we're a managed forest property. So we also want to know what benefit we're receiving. And from the sounds of what Mr. Garrett was saying, our property will not be paid, the costs incurred by the drain won't be covered by the city for us. That will be our cost.
So you're you're Haney, are you?
Yes.
Your costs are. So when I did this, sorry, pardon?
sorry, our cost, there's two sections. There's two
Oh.
costs for us. It's totaling 5,700, but there's two separate amounts.
Oh, sorry, 1 second, I have to look at this. Oh, yes, yeah, so I took, yeah, so you are a registered forest, so sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this. So you're a registered land, so your equivalent hectares are different. A portion of your land was redirected as part of that road, that road improvement, and that's the star. So the 2110 was redirected. You still, yes, you're correct. You still are assessed for the 3,366, and that all your area, like I mentioned. If you're in a watershed, you have a responsibility for the water generated on your land as it goes downstream. But I did take the portion that historically wouldn't have went there and took it out.
Okay, sorry. So if I understand right, it's the $3,000 amount that would be our responsibility.
That is correct.
Okay,
3366.
Okay. We also had Adam Martin approach us, and he said as long as we didn't fight him on anything, he would pay for all costs that we would be charged for the municipal drain. We're wondering, is this legal? And
yeah, oh yeah. It's definitely, it happens quite often. And what happens though is I can't deal with it. That's a private agreement between two landowners. So because this drain stays with subsequent landowners, right? It stays on the drain. It's part of the property. It's not going to go anywhere until it's abandoned. So this happens quite often, but it's always done. We always tell people as good as it is, I can't deal with it. You have to do that privately. But it's not. It's not common, but it does happen. We run into it quite often in smaller drains in residential areas. We can find that if there's a landowner with a lot of land. But again, it's outside of my scope of work under the act or what I'm allowed to do under the act. But certainly if they want to pay it, they can. That doesn't matter to the Drainage Act.
Okay, and just another question. So if I understand correctly, this municipal drain will be listed on our property deed forever. So if we sell, somebody looking to buy our property, they'll see that there's a municipal drain associated with our property.
Technically, yes. Do they ever see it? No. This is the whole problem with the Drainage Act. They're unregistered, so unless you have a lawyer that knows to ask municipalities if there's drains on that property or in that watershed. A lot of times, people don't realize they bought a property with a drain. That happens quite often, believe it or not. That's just the way it is. Yeah, it does. You're correct. It does. You are in this watershed. You are part of the Martin Drain.
Okay, and future costs for the drain, maintenance and that kind of thing, that's something that we can enter into an agreement with the Martins as well?
Yeah, that'd be privately between you and the Martins. However, I would say that it all the time. Maybe it's gone up but we carry between $5 and $7.50 a lineal meter for clean out. So it's 150 meters of clean out. So even if it was $25 a meter, you know where I'm going with this. It's an open drain. So we're, maintenance costs. I just want you to understand how the maintenance works. The maintenance, they maintain it and then they assess it back out, prorating it as a percentage based on that schedule of maintenance. But you can understand if it's 150 meters of open ditch, the maintenance costs aren't going to be as significant as the report you have in front of you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for questions.
Okay, thanks, Cindy and Scott. Next, Joel.
We have Michael Wilson.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Anyone else, Joel?
We have Paul Reed and Diane Dilling. Since you're on the phone, you can hit *6 to unmute.
Hi. So in '85, when the road authority completed the drainage modifications, it says on page 6 here that they took on the liability for all redirected runoff and as such are responsible for all costs associated with the redirected runoff, including any necessary downstream channel improvements related to the extra flow. So, does that include our Ford crossing?
No, the Ford crossing isn't part of the drain. It's and just to be clear, it's there. It says any redirected water, so there's still water going there. It is a low run, right? So they're responsible, and they have been assessed for the increased anything that had to do with their water to have the channel, the widening or the deepening, anything to do with the extra water. They were assessed for it under this report. But your fjord crossing is downstream quite a ways from where I needed to bring the culvert to have an outlet, a sufficient outlet, sorry.
Okay, so when you're talking about redirected runoff, including any necessary downstream channel improvements, you're only talking about the municipal drain. You're not talking about the channel that follows the municipal drain.
No, I'm not talking about down the municipal drain.
Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about anything downstream of the municipal drain.
So strictly the drain itself.
That is correct, yes. I can only deal with the drain, and but I'm obligated under the act to bring it to where there is a sufficient outlet.
Right, so that does not apply to the city of Corporal Lakes then, all that?
Well, the drain does, sorry, the drain is at the sufficient outlet for the water in the watershed.
Okay, so this here, which reads, and as such are responsible for all costs associated with the redirected runoff, including any necessary downstream channel improvements related to extra flow.
Yes, the downstream channel improvements is relating to the drain that's downstream of their lands.
Okay. It's just related to the municipal drain, not.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's water going there. It's so we bring it to the outlet. That's what our job is. That is the channel improvements that we're making. Like I had to make sure that it didn't affect the Martin's outlet, the 300 millimeters freeboard. So they were responsible for any costs associated with that.
Now, the other water being redirected across Pigeon Lake Road, just west of the Martin's entrance,
Yes.
running from south to north, cross Culvert on Pigeon Lake Road,
Yep.
just west of the Martin's entrance. It's also redirecting water.
Well, there was a culvert there under the original plans. I did look at it, but it doesn't. Once that goes there, like that culvert was there before the road did their improved ditching there. There was a center line culvert there. So that if the Martins didn't want to take the city of Kawartha Lakes Pigeon Lake Road culvert, I would have extended it up to that crossing. But at the time, the Martins were not interested in bringing it only up to their property, and they would deal with the rest themselves. So I'm just saying, like, if someone came to me and said they didn't want to take the water from the Kawartha Lakes culvert there, I would have been obligated under the act to bring a drain all the way to that culvert. Now, the Martins will do that internally, and they're allowed to do that internally. That's up to them if they would ask. And I explained this to Adam, but he wanted it brought to the property line. So people do that with tiling on their own. It depends on, it's just a cost analysis they have to do, whether they want to bring it up there or not.
So then, regarding any downstream improvements after where the municipal drain ends, like that we can't get across the Ford crossing, we're cut off from the rest of our property, we have to petition again for that, and then all them costs go to everybody on the drain again.
Yes, if you petition to extend it down, it'd It would be no different than if we extended it down now though, right? The people upstream would have to pay for it, yes. And I would assume it depends on who writes the report. You would hope that someone would look at this report for the rationale used when they extend it downstream, but yes. But I did send the letter to you about the Ford crossing with the increased water levels. So overall, there shouldn't be a negative effect to the crossing.
Well, tile drainage increases the speed of water flows, does it not?
Well, I would say that the tile works 24 hours a day. So it drains the soil. So if we didn't have tile, you'd get that runoff coming a lot quicker to your property. Because it wouldn't be, the soils would be saturated and then they won't be able to go into the soil, so they'll sheet flow off on regular rain events. Like if they're back to back, obviously, and they'd have to be larger. Whatever the soil can handle, but tile drainage drains that soil all day long, creating capacity in the system.
Any further questions, Paul and Diane?
No, I think that's all for now. He reviewed some of the questions we had talked to him about the other day.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm always available to ask questions. And I mean, I represent everyone on the land in the watershed. That's what I do. I'm an impartial engineer, so I have to, but unfortunately I do have to work under the rules of the Drainage Act. Not unfortunately, that's what I have to do. So some people would look at it. It's just like we deal with the Drainage Act every day, and so we have to write reports like that, and that's why the report's written this way.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Martin?
Adam Martin, if you want to press *6, if
Yeah.
you have any questions. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so just a quick review. The reason we applied for a drain was because we want to tile drain our farm so that we can hopefully grow better crops. Therefore, we needed a sufficient outlet. And we have decided that we want to pay for the neighbors' shares of the drain, the ones at it would be Haney and Paul and Diane and Mika Shepard. Those are the ones that the city is not paying for. And other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say. Oh, if there is a grant available, then we are asking the people to get the grant, and then we'll just pay for the rest.
So just to clarify through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
And Joel.
Pardon me?
Just to clarify through the chair, if I may.
Yep.
Joel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you normally send out the assessments after grant's been taken off. Is that correct?
Sure.
No, what I'm getting at is like normally the city would apply for the grant and then well, everyone does it differently, but normally they would apply for the grant and then they send it out post grant.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
That Mr. Garrett's is correct. So the city would apply to OMAFR for the grants based on the property dispositions and farm class codes, and then based on what they receive back from the grant, then assess back out to the drain landowners for their costs of the construction costs.
And through your chair, I'm just saying that so when other landowners too are wondering about their assessment and the grant's taken off, then they're not waiting for the grant. Because they're going to get a letter in the mail eventually, and then it can, if you're not familiar with the act, I guess maybe it could cause some confusion on the grant.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, anything further?
I think that's everything. Thanks for what you're doing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. That brings us down to 3.3 on the agenda. This is anybody's opportunity that's on the call this evening to either add or withdraw your signatures to the petition. So right now, I think the Martins are the only one on. Mr. Martin, you wish to your name to remain on the petition?
Yes, please. I would like to keep my name on the petition.
Thanks, and I'll call one last time if there's anybody else that wishes to add their name to the petition at this time. Okay, hearing none. That brings us to 3.4. So we'll go to the committee for what your wishes are. Councillor O'Reilly.
I think just to check with Mike that we're doing that right. The first recommendation that the city adopt the Martin Drain engineer's report, and proceed with the first and second reading of the bylaw to provide drainage works in the city of Kawartha Lakes known as the Martin Municipal Drain, and that City Council instructs staff to make the necessary arrangements for a court of revision to be held on the engineer's report for the Martin Municipal Drain.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be correct if it's the board's recommendation to proceed with the drain.
Okay, we've got a motion from Councillor O'Reilly. Is there a seconder for that motion? Charlie Clark. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, calling the question. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. That now brings us down to item 4, deputations, which I believe there are none. And then we're going to move into new business. 5.1, the reappointment of quarter revision members. Do you want to go through that, Joel? Or Mike?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Attached to the agenda, I don't know if you want to bring it up, Joel, is just kind of a OMAFRA's guide for quarter revision. So in the first page there is kind of introduction to what the quarter revision is, steps leading up to the quarter revision, why we get to that point. After every meeting for consideration, adopted by the Drainage Board and then so adopted by Council, we're obligated under the Act to hold a quarter revision. And this gives opportunity to landowners to make an appeal based on assessment. On page 2 there, there's the segment for the role of the members of the Court of Revision. The members of the court may hear appeals on 3 grounds. First, land or road has been assessed too high or low. Second, land or road should have been assessed but wasn't assessed. Or 3, due consideration has not been given to the land's use. Those are the main considerations when the members of the Court of Revisions are sitting for consideration on whether the applicant or the appellant's request is reasonable or not. There are some points, so I don't know, Joel, if you want to touch on, is the appointment process. So there will have to be nominations from the board. I believe we usually do 3 sitting members for the Court of Revision. That will come from this board. And then there's nominations from the board, and then you have to accept. From that point, then we go into we can go the board, the statutory or the Court of Revisions follows the Statutory Powers Act, which is just a process for making decisions. And once the board selects the 3 members for the Court of Revision, the engineer will then, or the opening of the Court of Revisions, there's usually an oath taken. I can't remember, Joel, at the last one, we usually do that, do we not? We usually take oaths for members of the Court of Revision.
Correct. That's an option that is provided. You can you swear an oath as a member of the Court of Revision. but it is not legally required. You can solemnly affirm as well.
Right. So I just refer you to, so page 28 kind of outlines the suggested procedures for the quarter revision. So we have an opening of the quarter revisions. At that point in time, the members have been selected, oaths are taken, members are legally required to act fairly, impartially, whether they declare this is publicly as an oath or not. Order of appeals, so the appeals and the order in which they will be held are read out. So if we could have a member of the drain or multiple people apply as appellants, and based on the order they apply, they're read out, and appellants then present their case. The landowners usually make oral cases of why their land is improperly assessed before the members of the court. The engineer may rebut the landowner's case. Late appeals, if the court of revision members choose, they can agree to certain late appeals. So we have a statutory time frame once the council has heard at the meeting consideration and granted, decided to move forward by passing bylaws with the drain. So there is a statutory time period for someone to apply. I think is it 30 days, Joel, to apply for an appeal to the court of revision. However, the court could then choose to entertain late appeals. The court would then deliver. Members usually retreat to a private room to review the requests. If the court is considering reducing assessment or adding to a property whose owner is not present, then they must adjourn the court of revision and then send notice to the absent parties. So the court of revision can choose to reduce someone's assessment. However, it has to go to another party to the drain. And if that party is not at the meeting, then it has to be adjourned and then wait for that party at the next meeting. So the board could the court of revision could assess somebody's cost to, say, the road authority or to a downstream landowner. But if that landowner is not there, they have to adjourn until they are there at the meeting. Choosing the court of revision and a rendering decision, the court of revision may give an oral decision on each appeal, but the oral decision should be followed up in writing. The court of revision should also document whether they decide to adopt or alter a version of the assessment schedule, or whether they choose to appoint the schedule as presented by the engineer. That's kind of a general rundown for procedures of the court of revision. I don't know if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman.
I was just going to add to why we're bringing this up today, because the city hasn't had a court of revision meeting since the implementation of the Webster drain. So that was in the last term of council, and at the beginning of this term of council, the Drainage Board was prudent to appoint some members to the court of revision with anticipation of the numerous new drains that are coming down the pipe, if you will. And they did appoint 3 members. So Jim Oriotis, Charlie Clark, and Councillor Ashmore were nominated for being members of the court of revision. And Chair Vale noted that he would be an alternate member with Mike Verbeek. That being said, the motion was to appoint until December 31st, 2022, which made sense at the time. However, the term of council has changed. The provincial government changed the term of council to November 15th. So we thought it would be prudent to adjust the timing of those appointments to November 14th, and to also consider the new members of the committee being Councillor O'Reilly and Mr. Wilcox. So at this point, the committee has the option to either reappoint the members that were appointed at the other meeting, or to appoint new members, whatever is their decision. And it would be good practice to have alternate members, because within the next 30 days, notice will be going out for the McEachern Brown and the Hugh Davidson Court of Revision. So this will be happening likely in early May, the Court of Revision, and then later on we will have, due to the decision made today, a Court of Revision for the Martin Municipal Drain, which will happen after that at some point. So we've got to now decide whether to keep the approved members that are already there and revise our recommendation or resolution, or appoint new members. So Chair Vail, I turn it over to you, and you can call 3 times to see if there's any recommendations from the committee.
Thanks, Joel and Mike. So everybody's heard the explanation and the long and the short of it. So at this point in time, would the committee like to make a motion to either keep the current members on the Board of Revision or nominate new members? Let's start with that. Councillor O'Reilly.
Just a thought, the 2 members that are on the board are here. Maybe we should ask them first if they wish to remain. Would that be appropriate? You're the chair, not me.
Sure. Okay, Charlie, you're interested in staying on. Jim, are you interested in staying on?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we need 3 and then some alternates. So can we have some nominations then for Charlie? Okay. Any further nominations? Any further nominations? Third, final time. Any further nominations? Hearing none. Councillor O'Reilly, do you accept or decline the nomination? Okay, thank you. So I think that's our Court of Revision, and then we need some alternate members. Joel?
That's correct, unless the 2 appointed alternate members would like to remain appointed.
Mike, do you wish to remain as an alternate? Okay, and I'll remain as an alternate. Everybody happy with that? You got everything you need, Joel?
We just need a motion for that resolution.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion that be accepted?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Thanks, Jim. Seconder? Charlie?
I'll second it.
Charlie? Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us down to number 6. You want to make a motion for adjournment, Charlie? I know you're just chomping at the bit to get out of here.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, seconder for Charlie's motion, Mike. All in favor? That carries. The Drainage Board is adjourned at 7:21 p.m. Thank you.